I'm always here for where we are right now in this country, which I feel is on the brink of complete and utter destruction. And I feel like fascism is raging, and what we know as media, the press, the fourth estate, the one thing holding back, or Hodor, if you are a Game of Thrones fan, it's the thing holding us together, has also disintegrated. Tell us what your thoughts are and talk a little bit about what is Project Censored.
Thanks for the opportunity, Karen. I really appreciate it. And given that we are really take deep dive into media and media criticism, we really appreciate you and what you do on this platform, because legacy media and establishment media tend to amplify dominant cultural views and establishment views that have very little to do with the public at large, which we criticize that the so-called mainstream press isn't very mainstream at all. It's actually elite, top-down managed news propaganda. And Project
Censored. Wait, pause. You gotta say that slowly so that it seeps in. When we say mainstream media today, we are talking about what?
Mainstream media is actually corporate media or legacy media. There isn't much mainstream about 6 corporations that control 90% of what we see, hear, read, etc. And that number is down from 50 in the 1980s, when media scholar Ben Bigdickian was kind of the canary in the coal mine, sort of like warning us about the directions that we were going with corporatized, privatized media and information systems. And Project Censored was founded in 1976 as a public interest group that was founded at Sonoma State University. We work on about 20 campuses now. So we're an educational nonprofit out of Northern California. And we work with faculty and students across the country, as well as interested community members, and to showcase and highlight important, independent, grassroots, solutions-based journalism that really gives people information that they can act upon. So projectcensored.org is where people can find information freely to get our curriculum, any of our information, our top censored and underreported stories going back to 1976. We do 25 a year. We vet hundreds of stories a year. And it's all through an educational process that focuses on critical media literacy education. We don't necessarily need gatekeepers. We don't really need fact checkers who's watching the watchers. What we need is an educated and informed public that knows how to think critically and independently on its own.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more with you, Mickey Huff. Okay. So the 6 corporations, just so people have an idea, I know News Corp is one of them.
We've got Disney, News Corp. I mean,
wait, pause. So Disney owns what? What media does Disney own?
ABC. I don't have the list in front of me, unfortunately. Okay. But I will tell you, if you go to Columbia Journalism's page, they actually have an ongoing, active, updated listing of who owns what. And they change. Comcast, Universal, there's ABC is owned by Disney, News Corp is Fox. But there's new players in the game now, Karen. And that's why, when we sit and we learn about, well, what are the 6 companies this month? What we're also needing to start doing is looking at the major tech companies. And of course, that's all over the news these days, quote unquote, whether it's Facebook, Alphabet, which owns Google, Facebook and Instagram. You've got, of course, now Spotify is all the rage. Somehow an entertainment platform is getting into the hot seat because journalists are saying that they're spreading misinformation. This is all while the New York Times spreads misinformation about war and foreign policy on a daily basis. When Bloomberg just reported a fake headline that Russia invaded Ukraine, and over at CNN, they're bemoaning that Spotify is ruining the credibility of journalism. Guess what, Karen? The corporate media has done a great job of ruining credibility all on their own over the last couple of decades. And this has been a long time coming. And this is what critical media literacy educates people about. It shows who's the power behind the platforms, who decides and makes, quote, news judgment about what we get to hear, read, and see. And so in addition to looking at old school kinds of censorship or prior restraint, what we also look at is algorithms, bots, sock puppets, shadow banning. I mean, you name it. There's a whole plethora of ways that media can now censor, guide, and shape information and thus public perception, which has been 100-year theory going back to people like Edward Bernays about how to control the public mind through information.
I have since last year made that required reading for my class at Hunter College. Ed Bernays' Propaganda, that book written
1928.
written in 1928, still relevant to this day. And it's chilling when you think about it. I'm on the site, projectcensored.org, and you talk about teaching us literacy, media literacy. Walk me through on this site where I can, everything I consume comes through my phone, right? If I'm that person and I
Sure.
get my news from my phone, as all my students do, they don't read a newspaper. I'm like, where do you get this? It popped up on I got a notification about it. I'm like, but from where?
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Our students sound very similar. So I know that we have to go through these digital channels, which is why it's all the more important to be, digitally media literate, because that is the new landscape, right? And we need to have the tools in order to deconstruct these power structures behind the messaging. So if you are on our website, for example, if you look at the top of the website, we have on the scroll the most censored stories in the newest book. We have links, of course, to our new publishing imprint. We actually are publishers now. We have a link to some of the books that we do, including A History of Fake News with Nolan Higdon. If you scroll down, the most important things I would say would be to go and look at Project Censored in the Classroom, which is all the way at the bottom of the site. But if you go at the bottom, sort of at the footer of the page, it talks about what is media censorship. What do we mean by that? We have resources for teachers and workshops for educators. We have a link on what are independent news sources that we've used and factually vetted. We have how to nominate underreported and censored stories, our archives. And again, I want to repeat Project Censored in the Classroom, because it gives educators ideas for assignments. And this is how we work with people across the country, that they have their students in real time research underreported independent stories, database, fact check them, and then look to see where they've been covered in the corporate media or not, and if so, how. And then they can nominate those stories, and our group of 28 to 30 expert judges go through hundreds of stories a year, and we distill them down to 25. Andy Lee Roth, my associate director, and I don't sit around a room just talking about like, what do we think is the most censored story? It's a really academic and rigorous process that is transparent. It has at least 4 or 5 stages of vetting before a story actually gets published in our yearly books on Censored Press and 7 Stories, our longtime publisher in New York. So I would encourage people to start poking around there. And, another great thing to do is we have a weekly radio show. It's on Pacifica. We're on 50 stations, called the Project Censored Show. I'm the producer and host of that, where we cover our stories and other issues in media every week. And also we have several documentary films. Our last one was shot by students, and it's called United States of Distraction, Fighting the Fake News Invasion, from 2020. And it walks through how fake news has been used to reestablish legitimacy among corporate media outlets that have lost their audience and lost credibility because they no longer really report in the public interest what's really going on. And we think that that's a crisis of democracy. And we believe strongly that through education, we can really help address the social justice issues that we face as a society if only we have access to information. And we also teach when teaching critical media literacy, we're teaching argumentation and critical thinking. It's not just important to have people think critically, they also have to be able to speak and write critically, effectively, transparently sourcing their facts. And we also teach people how to be critical and compassionate listeners, because it's not just about what we're saying. It's also about understanding what other people are saying and why, so that we have the opportunity to build bridges, not walls. We have the opportunity to find out, why is that source saying this? Why is this report gaining so much currency in society? Mm-hmm. What confirmation biases is this appealing to among certain demographics? And then how can we utilize the best of our independent media to help educate people about things that they are just simply unaware, right? And it's not just willful ignorance, which is an obvious and serious problem, as you know. It's a lot, there's millions of well-intentioned and well-meaning people that don't like being finger wagged or don't like being lectured to. And they just want an opportunity to be heard. And that's why Project Censored, I think, is different than a lot of other organizations that do media and media criticism, is our prime interest is education. And we want to meet people where they are, whatever level, from the general public to PhD dissertation. to try to help people make sense of the world around them. And media is a crucial tool in which to do that.